Hello, Arizona, and welcome to the Inside View. I'm Susie Garino, and today we are going to separate fact from fiction regarding medical marijuana. Who needs it? How do they get it? Joining us today is the top authority on this subject, Will Humble, Director of the Arizona Department of Health Services. Hello, Will.
Hey, thanks for the opportunity.
How are you?
Doing well.
Good. Let's clear up some of the confusion about medical marijuana. First of all, what is medical marijuana?
Well, marijuana is marijuana. The question is, how is it used? And so medical marijuana is intended to be used to help somebody who has a debilitating medical condition, as opposed to recreational use of marijuana, which is what most folks associate with pot.
Okay. All right. Well, can you tell us about the Arizona medical marijuana laws?
Well, the law was actually passed in November of 2010 by the voters by a very slim margin. It gave the responsibilities to implement the program to the Arizona Department of Health Services. So our team has been responsible for putting the program together. Our initial work was around getting the system ready for the registration cards, and then the second phase was really this dispensary piece, and we're in that phase now.
Okay. Well, what are some of the conditions that medical marijuana is used to treat?
Well, there's a series of 8 specific medical conditions that are outlined in the law that qualify people to get a marijuana registration card from us. But there's a catch-all category called severe and chronic pain. And really about 89% of the card holders in Arizona qualify for a registration card because of some medical condition that's resulting in severe and chronic pain, and their physician has signed a certification so that they could possess and get a card from us.
Okay, now what about post-traumatic stress disorder? Now, people that have that, can they benefit from medical marijuana?
So PTSD, or post-traumatic stress disorder, was not on the original list that came through on the voter initiative, but the voter-approved law outlined a process that asks the Department of Health Services to accept petitions periodically to consider adding new medical conditions. And in fact, we've received a petition to add PTSD along with a few other medical conditions. But we have a pretty stringent criteria. We're looking for solid medical evidence before we would approve a petition like that.
Now, how does a person get medical marijuana? What's the process?
Well, there's really three legal ways that people can get medical marijuana. Number one is if they live in a rural part of the state, they live further than 25 miles from the nearest dispensary, they can ask and get permission to grow 12 of their own plants for their own medical use. Folks can also get marijuana from a caregiver that they designate. Again, the caregiver would grow for that patient. And finally, folks can legally get marijuana if they have a card at one of the dispensaries in Arizona.
Now, if a person is here on travel, from out of state, now can they legally purchase, grow, or obtain medical marijuana?
Well, let's say they're from California, Colorado, or New Mexico, all of whom have laws in their states. They can possess marijuana. Let's say they have a New Mexico card. They can possess up to 2.5 ounces in the state if they brought it with them. But their New Mexico, California, Colorado cards don't authorize them to buy at an Arizona dispensary. So it provides some protection, but it doesn't allow them to purchase at an Arizona dispensary.
Okay. Well, you've been talking about different terms about medical marijuana. I just kind of want to clarify some of those terms. First of all, what is a grower?
Well, a grower could be basically anybody, the folks that I was just talking about. So a grower could be just a patient growing their own plants. A grower could be a caregiver that is growing plants for a patient. Or a grower could be somebody who is associated with a dispensary's cultivation facility, and that could be actually a very large facility, mostly indoors. And so really those are the 3 classes.
Okay, then what is a dispensary?
So a dispensary is essentially a retail store. And that's where folks can actually walk in. If they have an Arizona medical marijuana registration card from us, they could walk in and actually buy up to 2.5 ounces every 2 weeks from these retail stores, which are essentially dispensaries.
Okay. Now, are there any scientific studies about the benefits of using medical marijuana?
Yeah, I always try to base all of the decision making in the whole agency really on good, solid science so that we're making evidence-based decisions. And so, individual stories provide some level of evidence, and it's interesting, but we want to make our decisions based on peer-reviewed, sound science that can be really categorized as evidence-based, or things that we can really hold on to and be assured that we're making good decisions based on sound science.
Okay. Now, there's been research about how a person can't die or overdose on marijuana, including medical marijuana. Now, then why is it regulated?
Well, marijuana is actually relatively non-toxic, right? But it's not harmless. In other words, it's very difficult, if not impossible, to smoke so much marijuana that you die from the smoking or the ingestion. But it certainly impairs your ability to drive a car, to operate machinery, and could affect your parenting skills if you're not altogether there for your kids. And so while it's relatively non-toxic, that doesn't mean that it's harmless.
Okay, now I know you and your staff have heard different scenarios about people using medical marijuana for food, so like brownies and cookies and things like that. Now, is this something that your office regulates as well? Right,
so we regulate, like I said, all the dispensaries, and if a dispensary is infusing cannabis or marijuana into their food products, then we regulate them basically as a restaurant or a food processor, and also as a dispensary. So we're regulating them both for the dispensing of marijuana and to make sure that the food is safe besides.
So tell me about how medical marijuana kind of shows up in the drug testing. I mean, does it show up if you have something like brownies or cookies, or use it as a topical cream?
Right, so it could potentially show up in a blood or urine test at your workplace, whether it was a cream or ingested, or whether you're smoking the marijuana. And even though you have an Arizona medical marijuana card, it doesn't authorize you or allow you to be impaired at work or driving. It does allow you some protections in the workplace if there's doing, say, for example, random drug screening, and you show positive for marijuana. It provides some protection if you were not impaired at work.
Okay, okay. Now, can medical marijuana be smoked inside or near facilities, like public facilities? And are there any laws like the Smoke-Free Arizona Act that ban the smoking of medical marijuana in those places?
Right, so when we put the regulations together, we were really careful to try to keep marijuana use out of the eye of the public, and so we put restrictions on where it could be used, which basically it limits it to your own home. You can't smoke it on sidewalks, in public, in parks, at the ball game. Anywhere where you're in public, you essentially are not allowed to smoke, but you can smoke in your own private home.
Now, if a person gets pulled over by a police officer and they're caught with medical marijuana, now does the state help protect their rights?
It depends. If they have less than 2.5 ounces, they're an Arizona card holder, they're not impaired, then the police officer is not authorized to arrest the person, at least for that.
Okay.
However, if they're a patient, they have a card, they possess marijuana, but they're also impaired, you're in big trouble. So it doesn't protect you from misuse, but it does protect you from possessing up to 2.5 ounces under certain circumstances.
Now, if people have more questions about medical marijuana, where should they go?
The best thing to do is to go to azdhs.gov, which is our website, or other sort of government-sponsored types of websites. There's a lot of misinformation out there on the internet, as is the case with just about anything. So be careful about where you get your information and make sure it's a reputable source like azdhs.gov.
Okay, well, tell me a little bit about the role of the Department of Health Services and what you do.
Good question. I'm glad you asked that. While medical marijuana is a very visible part of what we do as a Department of Health Services, it's actually a very small part of our mission. We provide the behavioral health services for the folks in Arizona in the public system. We run the Arizona State Hospital. We run the Women, Infant, and Children program. We have the maternal and child health programs. We do the preparedness. We have the state laboratory. We were the point folks for during the 2009 flu pandemic. So we have an enormous mission. Marijuana is really a very small part of that mission.
Well, thank you so much for sharing this important information today with us. We appreciate it. That wraps it up for this edition of The Inside View. We want to thank our guest, Will Humble, for joining us today. From the outside view to the inside view. What's your view, Arizona?